It started with a simple plan: declutter the attic. Shante Broadus, poised as ever with a headscarf wrapped high and determination in her stride, climbed the creaky wooden stairs to the upper level of their Long Beach home. The attic had been closed off for years, a forgotten archive of dusty memories and boxed-up milestones. The house was being renovated, refreshed, revived, just like she hoped to do with her own spirit. She pulled at a heavy cardboard box marked "Studio Stuff." The faded marker handwriting was unmistakably Snoop's, his loops and slants familiar from decades of love notes and grocery lists. As she peeled open the flaps, a small envelope slipped out and landed at her feet. It was thick, sealed, and yellowed by time. Her heart thumped when she read the front. To Shante, in case I never say this out loud, 2003. She didn't move. The attic suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. 2003, the year everything almost fell apart. The letter felt like a time capsule of raw emotion, sealed shut by a younger version of the man she loved. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. Before we dive into this emotional discovery, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more real-life twists and untold stories like this one. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Shante brought the envelope downstairs but didn't open it right away. She placed it on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it might explode. The morning sun poured through the windows, casting a golden spotlight on the aged paper. It waited, silent, heavy. Later that day, her best friend Tasha dropped by. "You're deep in thought," Tasha said, grabbing an iced tea from the fridge. "What's going on?" Shante slid the envelope across the table. "Found this in the attic. It's from Calvin, dated 2003. Tasha arched a brow. "That was a hell of a year." "Exactly," Shante said quietly. The silence between them buzzed with memory. 2003 was the year Snoop was constantly on tour, rumors swirling, trust wearing thin like frayed rope. Shante remembered sleepless nights, harsh words, tearful prayers. It was the year they could have called it quits, but didn't. "You gonna open it?" Tasha asked gently. "I don't know. Part of me wants to, but what if it says something I can't unhear? Or what if it says exactly what you've needed all along?" That night, after dinner, and after Snoop had fallen asleep in the den watching basketball, Shante sat at the edge of the bed, letter in hand. She traced the edges with her nail. 20 years it waited. She took a breath and tore the flap. The first line hit like a tidal wave. "If I ever lose you, it'll be my biggest failure, not as a man, but as your man." Her vision blurred. The words were raw, unfiltered, no rhymes, no swagger, just Calvin, stripped down to his essence. The letter was long, personal, vulnerable. A man in the eye of his own storm, pouring himself onto paper in case he couldn't say it aloud. Shante covered her mouth, tears sliding down her cheeks. This wasn't just a letter. It was a mirror to their past, and a bridge to something unspoken, and it had only just begun. The next morning, Shante sat alone on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket despite the mild California warmth. The letter rested on her lap, open, creased now with the weight of revisiting old wounds. A single candle flickered beside her coffee, a quiet vigil to the past. She reread the lines, her lips moving slightly with each word. In the letter, Snoop had written, not as the icon, not as Snoop Dogg, but as Calvin Broadus, the man she met in high school, the boy who wrote her raps in notebooks and whispered dreams into her ear between classes. "I don't always know how to be what you need," one part read. "The world loves this version of me, but I don't know if I do sometimes. I'm scared you'll see that and walk away." It was 2003 all over again. The parties, the long absences, the tabloids hinting at affairs and tension. Shante remembered sitting in the kitchen alone, waiting for a call that never came, clutching hope like a fraying lifeline. She had kept it all together, for the kids, for the image, for her own pride, but she'd nearly broken. "I knew it was bad," Tasha said later that day, when Shante read her the letter aloud. "But I didn't know he was this lost." "Neither did I," Shante said softly. He never showed it, Tasha nodded. Men like him don't. They carry the weight until it sinks them. Shante paced the living room. Why didn't he give this to me then? Why hide it? Maybe he was scared. Maybe writing it down was the only way he could admit it. Or maybe he thought you wouldn't need it if he made it through. The letter continued to peel back layers. There are nights I lie awake thinking about everything I've built, and everything I've broken in the process. I don't want to lose you to the shadows I let grow between us. Each sentence was a memory unlocked. Shante saw their fights, their reconciliations, the way he'd hold her a little too tightly after long stretches apart, as if afraid she'd disappear. She recalled how even when she doubted him, she never stopped praying for him, never stopped hoping that somewhere underneath the persona was still the boy who loved her first. The letter wasn't just confessional, it was redemptive. There was a part where he thanked her for being the realest thing in his life, for not letting the fame consume her, for seeing him, really seeing him, when the rest of the world saw only smoke and swagger. But one paragraph halted her breath. There's someone I should have told you about. Not because I did something wrong, but because they changed the way I saw myself. And I didn't know how to explain that to you without making you question everything. Shante stared at that line, rereading it a dozen times. Who was he talking about? A woman, a friend, a mentor? Someone who showed him a truth he couldn't bear to share. The thought sent a ripple through her chest. The letter had revealed so much, but now it dangled a new mystery, an old scar that hadn't yet been revealed. She folded it carefully and set it down, her hands still trembling slightly. Whatever he had written, whatever he had left unsaid, it was time to confront it. That evening, Shante found herself back in the attic, this time not to clean, but to search. The letter had opened a wound she didn't know still existed, and now she was desperate to understand. There had to be more clues, more context, something. She unearthed old notebooks, lyric pads, photo albums, even cassettes with faded labels. Hours passed as the light outside shifted from gold to violet. Then, tucked in a cracked shoebox beneath a tangle of microphone cords, she found it, a photograph. It was of Calvin with a woman she didn't recognize somewhere backstage. They weren't intimate, not overtly, but the body language spoke volumes. He looked different, younger, looser, conflicted. On the back, in his scrawled handwriting, T, the mirror I didn't want but needed. Shante's fingers stiffened. T. Who was she? The next morning, Tasha noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. You found something else, didn't you? Shante handed over the photo. She's the one he mentioned in the letter, I think. He said she changed how he saw himself. Tasha studied it, then frowned. That's not just some fan, that's someone who got under his skin. Exactly. And what are you gonna do? I don't know, Shante whispered. I want to be angry, but I'm more confused. If he never crossed a line with her, why keep her a secret? They sat in silence, the letter lying open on the table beside them, like a wound still bleeding. Later that day, Shante wandered through the house, letter in one hand, the photo in the other. Her mind drifted to the early days, back when she and Calvin would sit in his beat-up car sharing dreams. Back when he made her laugh with terrible rhymes and wore cologne so strong it lingered in her hair. She remembered the Snoop Dogg who was still learning how to be a man, still unsure if he'd make it. She had seen all of him, the rising star, the overwhelmed husband, the father barely home. She stared at the photo again. Maybe this woman T saw the version of Calvin he couldn't show Shante. Maybe she was a mirror for his insecurities, the self-doubt he tried to bury in swagger and weed smoke. The letter continued to haunt her. If you ever read this, I hope you'll understand why I didn't want to be that man anymore, and why I couldn't let you carry the weight of him. The last paragraph was unfinished and a fragment cut short mid-thought. If you ever read this, That was it. No period, no closure. It was like hearing someone say they loved you and stopping right before the final word. Shante folded the letter again, slower this time, her hands steadier. She wasn't angry. She wasn't heartbroken. She was awakened. There was more to this story, more to him, And if she was going to live with that truth, she needed to hear the rest. Not from paper, not from memory. From him. The evening air was soft and thick with jasmine. Snoop was in the den, the game on mute, his feet up, remote in hand. Shante stood in the doorway, letter in one hand, the photo in the other. Her eyes didn't flinch. Neither did her voice. "We need to talk." He looked up, instantly sensing the shift. The weight in her voice wasn't anger, it was deeper. He muted the TV again, this time for good, and sat forward. "What's going on, baby?" She walked in slowly, placing both the letter and photo on the coffee table between them. "This was in the attic. You wrote it in 2003. Snoop's expression changed. His face, always composed, always in control, now softened. The words had found their way back home after 2 decades, and now they demanded to be answered. "I didn't mean for you to ever find that," he said, voice low. "But I did," Shante replied, "and now I need to know. All of it." He picked up the letter with reverence, like it was a ghost. His fingers ran along the edges, the handwriting a version of himself he had long tried to forget. "That was a dark time," he said. "I was lost, not to the fame that came with the game, but to myself. I didn't know who I was anymore." "And T?" she asked, pointing to the photo. Snoop paused. The silence stretched long. "She wasn't a lover," he finally said. "She was a mirror. She was someone I met in New York during a rough patch. We talked a lot. She called me out. Told me I was running from the man I promised to be, to you, to my kids, to myself." Shante folded her arms. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was ashamed. Not because I cheated, I didn't, but because she saw through me, and I let her. And that made me feel like I'd failed you. So I buried it. And I wrote that letter instead of saying it." His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't stop. "I wrote it thinking maybe I'd never be strong enough to tell you in person. But I wanted it to exist, just in case. I needed you to know that I saw how much you held us together, how much I depended on you, without ever saying it." Shante sat down across from him, her heart pounding, not from betrayal but from clarity. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that," she said, tears beginning to form. "Back then I was drowning too, and I thought I was doing it alone." "I know," he whispered. "I see it now. I just didn't know how to stop being Snoop long enough to be Calvin." They sat there in silence, two people who had weathered storms most couples never survive. The letter wasn't a confession of guilt. It was a monument to a man who once didn't know how to express the weight of his love. Snoop reached out and took her hand. "I didn't give it to you because I was scared it would make you leave. But now, all I want is to be worthy of staying." She leaned forward, touching her forehead to his. "You are. But you still owe me the last line." He smiled softly. "If you ever read this, I love you more than I ever had the words for." Weeks had passed since the letter surfaced, but its echo remained. The air in their home had changed, not heavier but fuller, like a room where silence had been replaced with music. One afternoon, Shante entered Snoop's studio, now quieter and more intimate than it had been in the roaring early 2000s. She held the letter in her hands, newly placed in a glass frame with a small gold plaque at the bottom, "For the truths that come late, and still save us." She set it gently on a shelf above his mixing board. Snoop turned and smiled when he saw it. "You really framed it?" "I did," she said. "Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that we survived it." He nodded, swallowing emotion. "That letter was me at my worst." "No," she corrected him gently. "It was you becoming your best." They had talked more in the past few weeks than they had in years, about the weight of fame, the fear of vulnerability, the sacrifices they both made in silence. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes they cried, sometimes they laughed at how close they came to collapsing. But each word was a brick laid in rebuilding something stronger than before. That night, Shante sat with Tasha on the porch, wine glasses in hand. "So now what?" Tasha asked. "You two gonna start a podcast? Write a book?" Shante laughed. "Maybe. We've been talking about creating something for couples, something real. Not just the highlight reel. Tasha clinked her glass against Shante's. You've always been the realest part of that empire. Shante smiled. He knows that now, and I finally know that he knew, even when he couldn't say it. Inside the house, Snoop was on the phone with their daughter, showing her the framed letter. His voice was warm, unguarded. He spoke not as a legend, but as a father who had almost lost his foundation and fought his way back. Later, as the sun dipped behind the Long Beach skyline, Shante sat at her desk and began typing. The title at the top of the document, Letters We Never Send, and the Ones That Find Us Anyway. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. Real love stories, real emotions, and the powerful truths we uncover when we least expect them.